Okay, welcome to the Town of Newington Conservation Commission meeting for November 17th, 2020 at 7 p.m. Ms. Gibbons, please call the roll.
Ben Ancona III,
Here.
John Bashan, Philip Block, John Casasanta,
Here.
Kathleen Marie Clark. I saw her. Bernadette Conway,
Please hold, Ms. Clark, you are muted, please.
I am, now I'm muted. Here.
okay. Bernadette Conway, Richard Leverrier,
Hello, right here.
Alan Paskowitz,
Here.
Andrea Sadil,
Here.
Max Turgeon.
Here.
Thank you.
Was John Bashant name called as here,
Yes.
as present?
I believe I was muted, but yes, I am here.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, as a point of order, I need, okay, is that Commissioner Block coming in at 7:02 p.m.? Commissioner Block, can you hear me? Commissioner Block?
I see him. This is Richard. I see him.
He may, yeah, he
Otherwise,
may not have connected with his audio.
Otherwise, I'll have to seat one of the alternates.
Oh, he's here.
I don't think he knows he is, though. We have to hold up a note with some instructions on it. Unmute.
That's a good idea.
Commissioner Block, can you hear me?
He has his hand
He's-
raised.
And he's speaking. I can see him.
Yeah,
talking.
he didn't connect his audio, I don't believe.
And I can't unmute him or respond to him that way.
Right.
Should consider switching to Microsoft Teams. It's much more, it's easier.
You may just want to seat someone, Commissioner, Mr. Siddell.
I'll
It's your
hold this
call.
up like this. Maybe he'll see it.
Commissioner Block, can you hear me?
Unless somebody can call him, but that's probably will be more problematic.
It gives you this option to connect with audio when you're turning it on, so I don't know if he'll see that.
Right, that's probably what he missed.
He's waving at the camera.
I don't know, is that printing coming out backwards on there?
Well, he's reading a note here, no audio. Well,
Yeah, you have to connect with audio, but there's my note coming out backwards though, right online. And I don't know how to write backwards, so.
Isn't there a
Yeah,
chat?
that's
Is there a
fine,
chat
John.
feature? Chat feature?
No, it's not turned on to do the administrator.
Andreas, do you have his phone number? I'll call him. Is there a
I
list?
don't think I do. I don't think I do. No, Commissioner Blocks, I do not. Mr. Hinckley, you may have the roll call. You know, we do have somebody's number here. Hold on.
I'm looking through my stuff.
Or you could send him an email.
I have his phone number. This is Alan.
Okay, oh, yep. Yes,
Okay,
I just,
his home phone is 666-1614, and his cell is 205-5858.
I'll try and call him while you guys go ahead.
So 1624?
No, 1614. 666-1614. That's his home.
yeah,
And his cell is 205-5858.
yeah, I think Gail's gonna try and call him. I don't, okay.
It
Yeah,
looks
when
like
you
he's got
talk to
his
him,
audio
tell him-
connected. I'm just trying to prompt him to unmute.
Yeah, Gail, if you talk to him, tell him to, he'll have to start the process over, and when prompted to connect with audio, he has to accept that.
I
Oh, he's got it now. He just needs to unmute himself.
I
It
Okay.
did.
looks like he is.
You have
Okay.
me?
Yes,
You're
we
there,
do.
Phil.
yeah,
Oh,
you're there.
okay.
He's there. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Block is present at 7:07 PM. Let the
Hooray.
minutes reflect that.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Conway is in as well.
702?
Welcome, Commissioner Conway.
My apologies for being late.
All right, moving on to item 3 on the agenda, public participation on non-agenda items. Each speaker limited 2 minutes. James, do we have anyone waiting to enter the
No
meeting from
public
the
at this
public?
time, sir.
No one.
No one at this time.
All right. Moving on to item 4, acceptance of minutes from the regular meeting of September 15th, 2020. Do I have any corrections, additions, deletions from the commissioners?
Yes, it's Richard here.
Commissioner Lavariere,
Yeah, I was present on time. The page 1 says arrived late. That's incorrect.
okay, so you want to have that strike that you were online that evening?
Yes, sir. I was present at the roll call. I was listed as a non-panelist and was promoted to panelist shortly after, during roll call. My meeting screen went blank and was promoted to panelist during roll call.
All right, Ms. Gibbons, can we make that correction?
Yes, I will make that correction.
Thank
you.
you. Any other additions, corrections from the commissioners?
Yes,
Commissioner Block,
okay, please make sure, I thought I was present last meeting, but I can't find my reference at the moment, but please make sure I'm listed for this meeting.
You got
okay,
it.
all right. Any other corrections from the commissioners? Let me check anybody raising their hand real quick. Seeing none, can I have a motion to accept the meeting minutes as amended from the regular meeting of September 15th, 2020?
I'll move, Richard.
Moved by Richard Commissioner Lavariere. Do I have a second?
Second,
Second from Alan Paskowitz. Commissioner Paskowitz,
correct.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Minutes pass unanimously. Okay. Moving on to item 5, public hearing, Town of Newington Inland Wetland and Watercourses Regulations, additions to the regulations regarding vernal pools. Mr. Hinckley, can you read in the public notice into the minutes, please?
I actually do not have that with me. There was a little foul up at work with the laptop versus the phone, so I did not get that. It is published. I can push it out to you guys tomorrow via email. I have a copy of it.
Okay.
I
Motion
apologize.
to table? The motion to
Who's
table?
speaking?
Phil, it's Phil.
Commissioner Block,
Yeah, motion to table, I believe is in order.
We to table the public hearing?
Yeah, if we don't have the announcement.
Well, the announcement's been published. It was published on the town website as well as the New Britain Herald. I just don't have it in front of me to read to you.
Oh,
Don't say anything.
all right.
Don't say anything. You don't remember.
All right, so shall I make an opening statement, Mr. Hinckley, and then we shall proceed with the other commissioners, and then we will open it up to the public. Sound fair?
Correct. Yep.
All right. So it was on the 28th of October, Mr. Hinckley and myself appeared before the TPC meeting and presented our proposed changes to the regulations, wetland regulations. There were some concerns that they brought up. One of them was how are the other neighboring towns, how do they handle the vernal pool definition and the language that they have in the regulations? And I believe Mr. Hinckley did a scouring of the local regulations. I think it was from Weathersfield, Rocky Hill, Hartford, and West Hartford.
Yeah, I did all the
I guess-
adjoining towns.
Correct. And it appears only Rocky Hill had a definition of vernal pool in the regulations and nothing more. They defined it and that was it. The other ones had nothing, no mention of vernal pools whatsoever. And that was one of the action items. TPC looked at this very critically as far as the changes. They were concerned about its scope. Another question that they had in the definition was whether it was natural or man-made. I think they said they took issue with that being called man-made and preferred to have that taken out of the language. Correct, Mr. Hinckley?
That was yes, that is what they wanted.
Yeah. So that being said, my position at this point is to put the definition into the regulations, define it as the definition in the regulations, but the section 7, when we talk about the indirect and direct indicators of a vernal pool, I'm proposing we put that somewhere in a backup in an appendix as a reference guideline. I think that's very technical language that we're putting into the regulations. And I think people would feel more comfortable if that was sort of not a rule per se. Someone could argue if there's another indicator, maybe of a vernal pool, and we can get into a technical discussion by another subject matter expert. So what I'm feeling, that section 7, put that in an appendix as a guideline, as a reference in case the question of a vernal pool comes up. At least we have a guideline of how to recognize a vernal pool, what type of survey would need to be done if a vernal pool is perhaps suspected in an upland review area. The last thing I'd like to comment on is the buffer currently is 200. I think for Newington, I think 100-foot buffer, I think would be adequate with the rest of the upland review area. 200 feet. I think 100, our current 100-foot boundary, I think is sufficient for Newington. I think if you go beyond that, I think some people may object to that. I think the town council, we said last time, has to approve these. They're going to be asking for TPC recommendation. And I think that could be a stumbling block. So I'd like to put, in summary, I'd like to put something into the regulations that addresses vernal pools. So I think the definition, like in the Rocky Hill, I know we based ours in the Cromwell regulations. Initially, this is basically what Cromwell has in there, and that was probably the closest at the time that we found was a good model or benchmark to use. So that is my comments in order to get this through. I think that is my proposal to the commission, and I welcome comments from the rest of the commission. Those are my thoughts based on meeting with TPZ about 3 weeks ago to get their opinion on this regulation. revision. And those are my thoughts right now, and I will open it up to other comments.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
if Mr. Hinckley would like, I can place the legal notice on the screen so it can be read into the record properly. And then
That would-
Commissioner Lavalier has his hand up.
That would be fine. We can do that. That would be wonderful.
Give me just a moment.
Sure.
There you are.
do we have to read this, Mr. Hinckley, or can
I
we just?
will read it. I'll read into it.
Thank
The
you.
Newington Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing to consider the following: the Town of Newington Inland Wetland and Watercourse Regulations amendments to the regulations regarding vernal pools. This was dated October 21st, 2020, and it was posted in the New Britain Herald on November 5th and November 11th.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'd
Thank
like
you,
to
James.
add, before we go back to comments, the town attorney, Ben Ancona, did look at the regulations, this draft that's before us right now. And I think he found nothing legally wrong with it. If you want to present that and put that into the record, Mr. Hinckley. He did have some concerns from constitutionality, how possibly a case could come before us. I think that was distributed to the rest of the commissioners, the recommendation from the town attorney, correct?
Yes, I did push that out to all the commissioners. And as I read it, basically he says it does not appear the subject revisions are in violative form of statutory or case law. And then you're right, he goes on to say that it could be a constitutional issue going forward at some point in the future.
All right. And then we just got some feedback in from Darcy Winther from the DEEP on her, wanted
Correct.
to read her comments into the record. Was, I think, again, and she sort of said the same thing, essentially, Mr. Hinckley, correct?
Yeah, she has some minor comments, a couple of typos and just some corrections of
Right.
the vernal pool definition. And I apologize for not pushing that out to all the commissioners. I can do that tomorrow as well. But if going forward, if you guys take up the mantle of Chairman Sedill's suggestion of some of what he's proposing, then some of the stuff that DEP has suggested really goes away because it wouldn't technically be in the regs. So.
All right, I
So I
just
may-
wanted to
so I-
make those two comments. That's a requirement in the process here, so the town attorney and DEP to comment on the revision. So right now, I'm going to throw it over to the commissioners. I'm going to start with Commissioner Varier, since he had his hand up first. Commissioner Varier, you have the floor, and then Commissioner Clark.
Thank you. Just want to make sure everyone can hear me. Everyone can hear me? Good?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So with my concern that I, did some reflecting and I thought about the verbiage as to man-made versus natural. And I think that there's something that, it's a little bit of a gray area to me that may need to get fleshed out, and, whether or not there should be specifications. If I owned a farm, say, and was to change the grading of the soil and it created an area that would be classified as a vernal pool, is there a duty that exists to that being said, in a different hypothetical, let's say there is a wetland that exists and I was to regrade my soil and it was to make that wetland larger. I think that would be a little bit different, and maybe you should have a duty to protect that new area. but like by having a vernal pool be created by a man-made change, you know, it's, I'm not so sure that the landowner should have a duty to preserve it. Again, exception, I think there should be an exception that if a naturally occurring pool was to exist or wetland was to exist and a man-made change was to affect it and make it larger, I think that maybe there should be a duty to preserve it, but.
I think the point is there is no distinction. That's what it is. Just like with wetlands. This is John Bashan speaking. I think there is no distinction. So if there's a vernal pool, it's a vernal pool. There would be no, wouldn't matter where it came from. Just like with a wetland. If there's a wetland, it doesn't matter if it was naturally occurring or man-made.
Mr. Chairman?
I'd like to comment on that.
Commissioner Paskowitz.
Yes, the distinction is this. If it's man-made and it's not in a wetland, you wouldn't need a permit to work on the land such as the farm. But if there is a wetland and it's designated as a wetland on the farm, you do in fact proposing to change the grade or the soil and move it, you need a permit. So the permit would be taken out, as we know, and indications would be made as to the land being expanded or not, and what's going to be taking place as far as soil removal. So there are two different scenarios. One would require a permit and one would not. But it would be determined on whether or not there's already a wetland and the wetland itself is changed by physical movement of land.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Paskowitz, I do have a quick question real quick for you. So we would not make the distinction between natural or man-made? We just say it's a vernal pool in the definition that's before us here, the third line in the paragraph there.
Okay, repeat your question, please.
No, when we say natural or man-made, I hear what you're saying. This would apply to something that's already in the upland review area.
Correct.
That's something that somebody did in their backyard, created a vernal pool that was not, originally in an upland review area, right?
Right.
I think that's what you're trying to say. So as far as the definition goes, how should that be altered in your opinion? Should we just don't make the distinction, natural and man-made, or just say a vernal pool lacks a permanent outlet or any, how do we address that in the definition?
Mr. Chairman?
Wait, let me finish. I have to speak now, please, Phil Block. I think we need to discuss that further rather than make a quick judgment tonight. And I would work on the verbiage of that and put it out to everyone.
Okay. Commissioner Clark's been waiting. I'd like to go to her and then to Commissioner Block, please.
Thank you.
Am I
Yes.
speaking now?
Yes, I'm sorry, sorry.
To coin a phrase, I want to address several things while I have the chance. Number one, if we're taking out the new 200 buffer, I hate to say it, what is the point of having this change anyway? Is it because, and again, refresh my memory, that vernal pool was not defined in any of our regulations, or was it? So I'm going to ask you that.
Commissioner Clark, to answer that first question, the regulations do not define vernal pool. That's why we're here, we're gathered here this evening, is to establish a definition and any related information that should be added to the regulation.
Okay, so
Commissioner
I'm just confirming that was the point. So we're just adding it in there and making sure that it is defined along with all the other water courses and wetlands that we have been charged with protecting up until this point. All right, just again, this is more of a summary so we know where we're headed with this. So we want to preserve a definition, but take away some of the extra protection that we proposed, because I do believe, I'm not disagreeing with you, quite rightly, I think it's a big ask and is more likely to be shot down, whereas just a definition of a vernal pool, so someone knows what it is, who's never heard of it, has something right in front of their face, right? So this is what you accomplished by having your conversation with TPZ. I'm also going to address the opinion of Mr. Ancona II, and he was speaking about the constitutionality of adding, I believe, the 200 feet buffer. But when I read it, and I'm sorry he's not present, but I'm sure he isn't, and that's that last sentence, which talks about he doesn't think would stand up to scrutiny as far as the constitutionality. I don't see how the 100-foot buffer that totally exists would necessarily stand up to that either, mostly because there were no wetlands regulations at the time of the framing of the Constitution. So I didn't quite understand where we were going with that, whether it was a point to not be willing to defend or be reluctant to defend the 200-foot change versus the existence of a vernal pool. So if any of the lawyers sitting there can help me out and have read that last paragraph, do you know what he was referring to?
Commissioner Clark, I believe, having spoke with Attorney Ancona in the past, he considers it an illegal take of property if that vernal pool, whether it's a 100-foot buffer, a vernal pool, or no buffer, he considers that a potential take if a vernal pool is discovered, even if we don't have a buffer and we don't allow them to do some certain activities that they thought they had the right to do. So I believe that's his take.
Okay, that's helpful. And also, but that would be different than his opinion of any other wetland or water course because it was already on the map. Are we talking about a newly discovered vernal pool? What you just told me was quite helpful. If you don't mind elaborating on my last point.
Obviously I can't speak for Attorney Ancona, but I believe that's the case. If, John Q. Public comes in and there's no wetlands around his property, he's got a little depression in the back and we find all the indicators and, he wanted to put a shed there and now it's a vernal pool and we're not going to allow him to put the shed in, fill the vernal pool and put a shed in. So I think that's if it's a newly discovered vernal pool.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Commissioner Block, you've been waiting.
Yeah, I thought we already had this in the in our past discussions that we've voted that the vernal pools were to be kept maintained, and that any change to them would have to be brought up. So as a specific project. Am I wrong in that?
I don't quite, this is Alan Paskowitz. You said maintained in what manner and by whom?
He means preserved.
Right.
Well, the bottom line is currently there's nothing in our regs about vernal pools. That's what these regulation changes are discussing.
If Phil is finished.
Yeah, I'm
Yes.
finished.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Larriere, you had your hands up.
No, that was Bashan.
Commissioner Bashan, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And first of all, I'd like to apologize to Alan because I know he did a lot of work on this and I didn't pay as much of attention as I should have, and I'm just starting to come up with these questions now. So I think that Eric hit on something there that I was thinking about, and we condition applications when they're within 100 foot of a wetland. Wetlands are mapped. These vernal pools may not be mapped, and we're basically talking about the ones that are probably not mapped, since we're going back to the 100 foot issue, buffer. So because otherwise there would be no other changes. So again, we can't condition what goes on, or we can't condition an application for what is on the other side of a property line. So this basically, we're talking about unmapped, become a wetland, I guess, a vernal pool that's on the subject property, because I don't see how we could just look across the fence and say, oh, it looks like there's a vernal pool there. That would get really in a gray area, because we couldn't prove it. We couldn't compel the applicant to approach his neighbor to test it or whatever. So correct me if I'm wrong. Again, I apologize, but it seems like we're talking about vernal pools that are unmapped, that are on the subject property specifically.
Yeah,
I'd
that
like
would be
to-
correct.
I'd like
You're
to
right,
expand
John.
on-
You can't look
on-
across the fence. If an applicant comes in, we're only looking on his parcel of land, not his neighbor's.
I'd like to expand on his dialogue. This is
Mr.
Commissioner
Paskowitz.
Paskowitz. Something we probably didn't speak to, which probably should be more defined, is that when Commissioner Siddell and I sat down for numbers of times and went over this, we had talk of this referring closer to being a development, a new development, and not really a single family property. We didn't want to put, this quality of information and technicality on a residential homeowner. We were speaking to ourselves about it being more towards a new development where the wetland is identified and there may be a vernal pool in the wetland. That's not in writing here, but I would refer back to Commissioner Siddell to speak to that if he's, thinking on the same lines as I am.
Yeah, that was our intent, not to go around policing other people's private residences, but if a new application in an upland review came before us and it had vernal pool indicators, perhaps, how do we treat that? It was not, is looking at individual applications in current defined upland wetlands that are defined on our map. I think that I concur with you, Commissioner Paskowitz. That was our intent. Do you feel that we need to refine that definition? Somehow we need to have a.
Commissioner Paskowitz, yes, I think we should, because there's nothing in, I think there's been a lot of dialogue referring to single family and crossing over to a border or another property. And that, I don't believe, was our thought process.
I think the definition per se should stay, because that is the textbook definition of vernal pool. But perhaps somewhere in the regulation, maybe in section 7, we define that somehow, or cut another paragraph that outlines its purpose or intent.
I think that if I can speak, Commissioner Siddell, I think maybe the simplest idea that you basically come up with is we define it, and we put at the end of that definition, we put see Appendix A, vernal pool indicators, and we add that at the end, Appendix A, vernal pool indicators. And that way it's not a regulation per se, but it's just defined for someone who wants to look at it and see more information about it.
But I do want to address the point that, again, this is for new applications. I don't want to have people, I think that I got that and I agree with what you said, but I just want to reiterate the point that, again, this is for a new application in an existing wetland versus, some we may discover somewhere else. That's the question. Commissioner Laurier, I'll let you speak. Commissioner Laurier, have your hand up?
Okay, yeah. What about if we took the words in the definition, can be natural or man-made, comma, and just have it say, it usually lacks a permanent outlet for any fish population, and then put your specifications, as you just suggested, Commissioner, in some footnote thereafter. Rather than saying it can be natural or man-made, just remain silent on the issue in the definition, because I feel like that's getting down into the weeds there, figuratively. Maybe it would be better to take those words out altogether. From can
Natural or
to
man-made,
and.
taking that clause away.
Just taking the words, having the sentence there, instead of saying it can be natural or man-made, comma, and usually lacks a permanent outlet, just have it say it usually lacks a permanent outlet or any fish population. And that distinction as to natural versus man-made be more of a, I don't know how I'll say it, case by case, gray area that, yeah, I mean, I don't know if that necessarily needs to be in the definition.
Yeah,
Well,
site specific would
That's me,
be,
I'm
this is Commissioner Paskowitz. Site specific would be, I think what you're alluding to, on that. I agree about taking out the natural and man-made. It's gonna be a little hard to define that in the field without an expert looking at it.
All right, but Commissioner Paskowitz, getting to your point before about, you think that's enough treatment? That, again, this is, what we just discussed about, this is for future applications, right? We don't want to go, burden the individual homeowners.
Correct.
Do we think we've covered that, or how do we cover that?
Can she get back in?
We'll have to put it in writing, that it's specific to a new application with a subdivision, the building development of some sort. It doesn't reflect on a single family home.
Commissioner Bashan.
Yeah, so how about just, as Alan just mentioned, specifying the size of the project, either it's a commercial, residential development as opposed to an existing single family lot, something like that, if that was your intention. And then also, I'm a little bit confused on, because you referred to it a couple times about a vernal pool that's strictly in an upland review area. I mean, we would only see an application if it was in an upland review area, but I thought the intent of this, and maybe that was some of the fear, if that wasn't the intent, maybe that's some of the fear that we've heard, concern, let's say, that even if there is no mapped wetland there, that if there, let's say an average building inspector or a zoning enforcement officer or something notices this, what appears, is it his obligation to be scouting for this on a new development site, the site that we are planning on addressing, even if there is no upland review or mapped wetlands on the property, then all of a sudden, then now this is, he has to, flag that, and that would come before us. So I'm not sure of what the intent was there either.
Commissioner Paskowitz, you mentioned the term flag. And yes, as you know, typically wetlands would be flagged for new development, depending on how the development may encroach on it. So it isn't encroached. And, typically a wetland person that does that would look at the property of being a wetland. If he sees a vernal pool, he usually has a professional background enough to identify it and bring it to our attention.
Commissioner Ancona and then Commissioner Casasanta. Wait, I'd like to give Commissioner Ancona a moment to speak.
I just wanted to say that I think 200 feet is a little ridiculous. We should definitely scale it back to 100 or so. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay. Commissioner Casasanta, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My thoughts on this is we should keep the wording in the regulation as simple as possible, just really get a definition of vernal pool in the regs, and then do the heavy lifting in the appendix on this. Anything we need to define or tweak or further expand upon. I think the important thing is to get vernal pool in the regulations and to do it in a way that's not going to generate a lot of controversy and then we can address the conditions and all the whys and the wherefores in the appendix. Thank you.
I agree. Thank you for those words, Commissioner Casasanta. Commissioner Clark.
I would like to say that I'm really in favor of what Commissioner Lavarriere said, and I think striking the sentence that has it can be natural or man-made is genius. I love that. And I would additionally, speaking again to what we just said about making it simpler, I'd lose the rest of the sentence, because the thing is the adverb usually weakens that entire sentence and leaves it open for all sorts of, it's completely pointless, I think, to have that sentence with the term usually in it, because it takes all the power away from me. So I would lose the entire sentence about natural man-made usually lacks a permanent outflow or any, it may or it may not, but since it doesn't always, why don't we just get rid of it? I have another statement about, I do not like the thought of distinguishing between an existing property where the house was built in 1963 and a development. I don't think we do that with any of our other wetland enforcement. It is what it is. If there's a stream, I think for people's simple one owner properties, the problem's going to take care of itself. And I think the odds that there are vernal pools that are going to come up and become an issue on those properties is really slim to none. I don't see how we can distinguish between one kind of property or another going forward, because we can't do that whether it's a stream or anything else. So that's my comment on that. I also wonder, when you add something to an
Commissioner Clark, can I just back up your last statement there? So what would you suggest we put in the appendix as far as the type of property? What type of, we're looking for type of words to state that. What would you recommend? I mean, that's basically.
Well, my comment is not to recommend it at all. I don't see how we can distinguish and have different rules for different property.
So you prefer to leave it open, Commissioner Clark? Leave the language
I
open
would, because
as is.
I think that leaving it open will protect the vernal pools in some big old place that somebody suddenly starts to develop, not that we have too many of them. And I think the other issues, can you think of a single case during, at least I'll say the 8 years that I've been here, that involved a vernal pool on already developed privately owned property? I personally cannot, and I think the existence of such a thing is unlikely. But if it did exist, it should have the protection that a pristine area should have. I don't see how we can distinguish looking or other. I think it'll take care of itself with, again, not calling attention to something. I think it's more practical to leave it out, because I don't know that that would stand up to scrutiny. If you understand what I'm saying, if you can't say, well, you know,
I concur with you.
You know, Joe Schmo has a stream in his backyard, and we're going to take better care of that stream than we are of the stream that's on, you know, developer A. Great. Thank you.
No, that's true, because as you mentioned, the word enforcement came up. Yeah, we don't go out and say, oh, did your house exist pre-wetlands 1973? Okay, you get a pass. And oh, your house was built in 74. Well, you know, you're the neighbor, but we're going to put the hammer to you. Yeah, we don't, it's not that way. So I think leaving out anything about what kind of property this is going to be looked at on or anything is probably the safest bet. But again, I'm just the advisor. I'm not a voting member. So.
Thanks.
Commissioner Clark, was that the rest of your comment? I cut you off.
Yes, again, they were completely two separate things, but I'd strike that whole sentence back to the nicely written paragraph. I'd strike that entire sentence, the part that.
Well, let me ask you this. How about this? I was thinking, you know, a small body of standing water, usually drying out for part of the year during warm weather, and may lack a permanent outlet or any fish population. How does that sound?
Yeah, that sounds fine. I like that better than usually. I think
Right.
the may is a little more forgiving. And then, in other words, your goal is to keep the definition as close to the scientific definition of a vernal pool upon which this paragraph is founded.
Benchmarked, yes. Okay. Commissioner
Commissioner
Paskowitz,
Yes.
go ahead.
Referring to vernal pools and the technical aspects of it, a vernal pool cannot have a fish population in it. So usually is out, may even be out because they cannot have a fish population. That's a true fact. If you read
Okay.
vernal pool definition.
Then maybe you just want to strike the whole sentence like the Commissioner Clark suggested.
I'm relying on you, Commissioner Paskowitz. You
Agree.
are our resident
Well,
specialist, subject
let me
matter
read-
expert here.
let me read it. I'm not an expert. I'm just passing on information, and we
if I
all
may,
are.
Well, it's
Commissioner Soto?
noted. It's noted. Go ahead, Commissioner
Okay.
Bashan.
So it seems like there's three issues here. One is the 100-foot versus 200-foot buffer. I agree with those who said that 100 is okay.
I'm on board. Done.
Okay. The three issues, the buffer, the definition, which I think we're kind of overemphasizing the definition. I think more importantly is the application, what parcels it will be applied to. And so just to kind of give the opposite viewpoint of Commissioner Clark's reasoning. So my concern is the half-acre residential property that has no upland review. There's no mapped wetlands on it, but someone says, look over there, it looks like a depression in the ground, or is that a vernal pool? And then we start compelling the applicant to prove that it is or it isn't. So that's where my concern would come in. And again, I'm going back to a vernal pool that may not be in a mapped wetland. So, and it can exist easily.
I'm
Commissioner
trying to
Paskowitz.
follow. Commissioner Pat, I'm trying to follow everything you said, and it's a little bit back and forth. I'm not quite sure what to take from it.
If I may continue, then I don't think an existing residential half-acre lot, especially if it's not in a upland review area, and there's no other evidence of wetlands in the area, that we could have a ZEO or another land use official, start to point out things that are not even on a map, and then we would be compelling the property owner to disprove it. So I think it probably is better sticking with new developments and you could either rate it, you could either apply it to a certain size project or just say any new development. But our town is so far developed. There's so little left to develop that, I agree with whoever said that we probably aren't going to, this isn't probably going to not come into play very often. So
I don't feel that we've got a lot of good comments
Commissioner
on and a lot of good dialogue, but I think we need to reconsider this part of the definition and get back on it at another meeting before we try to refine the language right now. Because we have a lot
Chairman
of
Sadel,
different-
so I would say what we just spoke about, that would not be part of the definition, okay? That would, just the definition would stay. We can take out that sentence we want, that's fine. As far as addressing the applicability, we can move that towards the appendix. I mean, if it meets the requirements, it's a guideline, yes or no, check, check, check. Is these species there? Is it witnessed? That sets the guideline of yes or no, wherever it may be, without getting involved, twisted in this conversation here. I want to make that distinction. We're just looking for the definition, not its applicability. It just defines it. The applicability, if we want to, we can put that in the appendix, or even do we have to? That's just a guideline to say, is it or is it not? wherever it may be. We can't have crystal ball, whatever, what would happen. So that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, if I may, I only offer this because of the way you expressed that was possibly the intent, that it wasn't intended for, that it was more intended for larger, okay.
That's true.
So that's why I said it. So I wasn't sure.
Understood. But to address that, we would put that in the appendix section, not in the definition. What we're doing in the regulation is the definition, period, wherever it may be.
Then on that point, I think
Let's
the definition is fine. It's pretty much standard boilerplate definition. And if that one word man-made, I mean, if that's bothering someone, I don't know why it would, but it's in all wetlands regulations that it's indistinguishable whether it doesn't matter whether it's man-made or natural. So, I don't know why people are hung up on that one word, but.
I have a comment on the
Commissioner Clark.
definition. Hello?
Commissioner Clark.
Yes, thank you. And this is about although I agree with Mr. Bashan, but I also think if the TPZ didn't like man-made, I just love striking that phrase. I'm going to say that another time, but I want to specifically say something about the fish population. The point about fish is that a vernal pool can have fish, but it can't have a permanent fish population. They're not going to last because there's no outflow. Someone's probably just going to eat them. So that adjective permanent outlet, it actually should extend to the fish, permanent outlet or any permanent fish population. And that's a definition that I looked that definition up, and I don't know if we just assumed permanent was going to apply to fish, but it's a permanent fish population does not exist in a vernal pool. But it's not that a fish population doesn't exist in a vernal pool.
Commissioner Paskowitz. I agree with you. I like the word permanent across the board. I feel that brings more confidence to whether there's fish or not, and whether or not they're going to be there in the future.
Yeah, so I'd strike any and use the word permanent in front of fish, so nobody says, hey, I found a fish in there, so it's not a vernal pool, if that
Correct.
makes sense. And I'm actually referring to the state of Michigan's definition of vernal pools for what it's worth, because it's the first one that popped up, but they refer to a permanent fish population.
I like it.
And then we get rid of usually, say it lacks a permanent outlet or any permanent fish population. How's that sound?
Let's see. And I thought before you used the word may, which I liked. It may lack a permanent outlet. Oh, wait a minute. Now something's not jiving right now. Like I said, I didn't like usually, because I think usually takes away any kind of a definition, because it either does or it doesn't. Correct? It may lack. Yeah, I think we have to revisit that rather than us debating it. I think that's something that once we come up with the final thing, whoever's in charge of that at this point, we need to look up and see how that should work. But I get rid of natural and man-made. I don't know. I don't like usually, but maybe the rest of you do, and maybe it appears in another definition, in which case go right ahead. But it usually lacks a permanent outlet and or a permanent fish population.
Okay, noted.
But you gotta get rid of any, because I think that's trouble.
All right.
I might have one comment if you want to. You may want to, just food for thought again. I mean, the definition of vernal pool, because you guys list, I mean, in this definition, all the species are there, the obligatory species. And basically all the stuff we're going to put in the appendix, which is the other stuff, lists all the same things. So maybe you want to look at that definition and say, hey, it pretty much covers everything that we're going to put in an appendix. So maybe you just scrap the appendix as well. Just a thought. You guys are going to have to look at it, but just, I mean, I know there's a little more information in that other stuff. So, but maybe a more beefed up, like you guys are massaging the definition now. I think you got some very good ideas that might just work there. And then everything is right there. You don't have to refer to something else because a lot of people aren't going to want to flip to the back of the book and unless they're looking for the answers, to just look at an appendix. Just a thought.
Okay.
One more thought. How about we just
Commissioner Bashan.
How about we just borrow from DEP's definition of a vernal pool or some other standard accepted definition?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Eric, this is what's in Rocky Hills, correct? Is Rocky Hills?
This is Cromwell's definition.
Okay.
This is Cromwell's definition. I have not compared this to Rocky Hill's definition. I can push that out to you guys tomorrow. Of course, it might just add more confusion, but I will do that.
All right, we're interested. Obviously, we're looking at all the references.
Yeah.
Commissioner Paskowitz. Commissioner Bashan referred to DEP's definition. I'd like Eric, if you could please look at DEP's definition and see if it coincides with this definition or the others that you are going to look at for correct verbiage.
Okay, I will, if I find them both, and I'll push them all out to you guys tomorrow or the next day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else at this time? All right, James, are there any comments from the public? Is anyone on the public online and wishes to speak?
No public still.
No public. All right, I think we have a few actions. Obviously, we're going to work the definition. We're going to, as of now, push everything over to the appendix, the more detailed checklists and surveys, if you will. Again, does anybody have any issue with that, moving that towards the backup as reference material? Does anybody have any objection to that?
I don't.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner.
I do not.
No.
Thank you. All right. I'm going to be last call here. Anybody else wishes to speak? Otherwise, if we're exhausted this debate, I am going to ask Madam Secretary for a motion. We're going to keep the public hearing open, at least for another 30 days until the next meeting. So can I have a motion to leave this public hearing on vernal pool revisions open till the December meeting?
Were you asking me to make the motion, Mr.
I'm giving
Sedil?
you the,
I will say, I move that we keep this public hearing about vernal pools open until the December meeting of the Conservation Commission.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Paskowitz. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Okay, motion passes unanimously. All right, moving on to new business. There is none. Section 7, old business, there is none. Moving on to Section 8, public participation on non-agenda items. Persons are limited to 2 minutes to speak. Do we have anyone online, James?
There is none.
All right, moving on to Section 9, communications and reports. Item A, Mr. Hinckley, do you have any agent communications?
Just a couple things. The new town planner started a couple weeks ago. Her name is Renata Bertotti. She came from Meriden and Manchester. She couldn't attend tonight's meeting, but she does plan on popping in here and there to have discussions with you guys, etc. So one, let's know about that. And one other thing that she is implementing is there is going to be a which we currently have. We can have a pre-application meeting. So basically, if an applicant is looking at a site in town and they want to have some thoughts on it, they can basically sign a waiver that says, hey, anything we talk about at the meeting is, nobody's getting held to anything, and they can come in and have a discussion with TPZ or the Wetlands Commission and get your thoughts on it so they can incorporate those thoughts and ideas into a future submittal. So I think that's a good thing going forward. And I think I know TPZ is going to be using it, and I believe actually we may be using it upcoming very soon as well for a potential application. Otherwise, I'm good. Unless anybody has any questions?
It's Commissioner Paskowitz, just a comment. I've worked in a number of towns before as a building official, and we've used that streamlined method to get things on the table prior to the formal application, so that things are out on the table and it actually expedites everything a lot quicker.
Yep.
So I'm entirely agreeable to, have us in this town work towards that.
Eliminates a lot of surprises, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah, it should. Especially for new developers that may not be used to Newington.
Okay. Item B, Town Council Liaison Communications. Councilwoman Pedrego, do you have anything to report?
Just to kind of add on to what Eric said, the new town planner, for your information, she's a resident of Newington, which I think can be and may be very, very beneficial because her decisions will impact her and her family as well as the town itself. So that's a good thing. Secondly, I'm not sure if you're aware, but there was a zoning application put in for the area around Newington Junction. The initial application was for both the west side and the east side. The west side was going to be not an overlay zone. I forget what. Oh,
it was a zone change.
PLD, land development PD to change it to a PD zone.
Correct.
And there was a lot of discussion, and for a Zoom meeting, there were residents in the area that did make the attempt to show up for a couple of the public hearings. And at the last meeting, it was decided that the zone change for the west side, which is where the Dunkin' Donuts is and the gas station, was approved. And basically what that's going to be is a drive-through Dunkin' Donuts. And the zone change for the east side was was taken out of the application, and it's going to be considered at a later date what to do with that whole area there.
Right. Once they have a real proposed development, I think is more in line with what they wanted there.
Exactly. And they want also the new town planner to, maybe have a say in that as well, and maybe have some more neighborhood meetings or charrettes. I mean, but it's not going to be forgotten. I mean, I do believe that they're going to be somewhat aggressive about determining what to do with that area of town. The third thing, I'm not sure whether this came up at your last meeting or not.
Councilwoman, is there any wetlands application involved in that, what you just talked about? Are we, because there's no commissioner, will we be involved in that?
No, I don't believe so. Is there?
Nothing on the west side, potentially maybe something along the east side near the railroad tracks and in conjunction, but that remains to be seen.
Right. And then just the other thing, I don't know whether you're aware of, but the town received a grant to do they're going to do a sidewalk that's connecting Churchill Park to Lewis Street. There's that gap. The sidewalk goes up Main Street and all the way up to like the end to the landfill at Churchill Park, and then it just kind of stops. But our town engineer has gotten a grant, and we're going to put a sidewalk in from the landfill area up to Lewis Street. And, the selling point is, connectivity, walking, biking, and that is a dangerous area. Residents from, some of the condos there trying to get to Mill Pond
There's
Park.
an assisted living place there, if I recall. There's assisted living.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's assisted living Middlewoods. And
Yes,
people who live in Churchill Bridge, they might want to walk to, the shopping area, Price Chopper or whatever. And I myself have seen people trying to navigate that particular section without sidewalks, and it is dangerous. So hopefully that will be a beneficial thing.
Yeah, and I did work with the town engineer on that. So they are avoiding the wetlands in that area. So they were cognizant of them. I made them aware of it. So all their grading and sloping, they kept out of the regulated area for that plan.
Commissioner Paskowitz just making a comment. Yes, most of us do, we drive by that to shop on the turnpike. And it's like a tunnel through there, and it kind of narrows in, and there's so much overhead canopy around here. It's kind of hard to see people even in the daytime walking along that road. It's a safety factor, and I'm all for an expansion of a sidewalk for people to be able to travel back and forth more safely than it is. And hopefully maybe there'll be some lighting involved as well. I'm just putting that as a comment.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on to section C, invasive plants. Commissioner Clark, do you have an update for us?
Yes, hi, I've been in touch with Patty Foley. Our scheduled first photography session about invasive plants had to be canceled because of the weather. And the project rules change on January 1st, I believe. So at the moment, we are in touch. We're going to come up with something, but it probably will not be during the holiday season.
Okay.
Just
Moving off.
quick question for Commissioner. Did you happen to get in touch with Gregory Bugby regarding looking at Mill Pond or other water bodies in town for his expertise?
Well, Alan, I did not, and part of the reason is just I feel the question is who's going to do what, and I feel a little hesitant as far as I thought we were going to be working with Parks and Rec, but obviously that's not the point. I mean, that's not happening, and I brought home to me again by reviewing the minutes. So the question is, if I do, which I'm certainly willing to pursue, I'm just going to throw out to the rest of the commission, what do we do with it? Do we make a report to Parks and Rec? Are they interested? I guess it's really, I felt we hit a lot of dead ends when we were trying to look at the health of the pond. I think we were all concerned about it, but I felt a bit stymied as far as we have no budget, we have no way forward. Would our opinions or Mr. Bugby's opinions be received by Parks and Rec, TPZ, and Town Council? So I'm kind of thinking I might want to review that among all of us. Do I do that after I contact a specialist or before?
Well, let me expand on that. This is his forte, and he actually has, a program that's dedicated that through the state with grant money to go out to towns. So I'm sure he would give you and us and the town support in giving out the documentation or dialogue to discuss how he would go about it in helping out the town with this invasive program. This is not something he's doing just because he knows about it. It's an actual program. So I would still, say he's one of the best avenues, since it's a state agency and they're open to doing it for any town in the state of Connecticut.
Yeah, I did speak to one other, I'm going to say, I can't remember who I talked to, but, and I think it might have been Deep. And I think I talked to Eric about it, but Eric, it was months ago at this point in time. And I don't remember. And I think we just hit the point where one of the things that I was looking at, it actually cost money. So that was the end of that. But I'm happy to look at it again. I just felt a little, after we found that Parks and Rec had moved on and was looking at Churchill instead. And my findings with the invasive plant growing around the edge was an interesting piece of information, but nothing was going to happen with it as far as I know. I'm happy to do it, and I'd love to see a way forward with that information.
So would I, because you've been bringing this out to our attention for quite some time, and it's been a big learning curve for myself, and I'm sure everyone else, and I appreciate your taking the time to do that. Thank you.
Will do.
All right, thank you, commissioners. This concludes our agenda for this evening. May I have a motion to adjourn.
So moved by Richard.
So moved by Richard, Commissioner Laurier. May I have a second?
Second in John Bashan.
Seconded by Commissioner Bashan. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Stay safe and be well.
Good
You as
night.
well. Good night.
Happy Thanksgiving,
night.
everyone.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Yeah.